What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and welcome back to another episode of the Multi-Weapon System series. And this one, we're going to be starting to set up the character blueprint information, so let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so we are back in the project that we were working out of in the last video, where we made all of our weapons in the weapon information. Now it's time to be able to use some of that information in our character blueprint. Now, one thing I do just want to cover before we get too deep into the coding for the character side of things is I want to go over for anybody who wanted to use an inventory system, because we're not using or setting things up for an inventory system in this, but if you have one and you have things like potency and stack price or stack sizes and sell prices, or other information that might be associated to just your specific game, you can add all of this inside of the enumerator, the struct that we made. So the weapon item info struct, you would add things like potency, sell price, buy price, an image for the weapon if you wanted to. All of that would go right inside of here. So I just wanted to state this for those of you who might be using an inventory system where you would add those extra pieces of information. But let's go ahead and start getting ready for the character. So first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to open up our blueprints for the third person character, or whatever character blueprint you're using. And I'm going to first adjust the mesh. So we're going to go down to the mesh here, and I have a tribal warrior dude. Let's see. Alright, so I just jumped over the shader compiling, so that way we weren't stuck there. But we've added in now our character mesh here, so I've got this tribal warrior dude. And we're going to go into our event graph, and the first thing that we should really be setting up is a way to be able to find our weapons, so a simple detection system. Now for me, I like setting up a custom trace channel for any interactable objects, just to keep everything nice and clean. So the way that we can do this is if we go to Edit, Project Settings, and then under Engine, you'll see Collision. Now, under collision here, we'll see trace channels and new trace channel. So we're going to click on this, and we'll name it to interactable. And we're going to set the default response to ignore. This way, everything that is in our world or everything that we place in the world, its default response is going to be ignore. But on the interactable items, we can set this to be a blocking interaction. So now we'll set that up, and we'll just close that. And now we're going to make our trace. So we're going to right click, go custom event, and we're going to go detect objects. And from here, we'll just pull off and go sphere, trace by channel. And we're going to get the single one, not the multi. And now for our start and end locations, the start point is going to be get actor location. And then we're going to pull off with the return value here and get an add node, because we're going to add 50 units to the Z, because we want it to be more to his chest here, and realistically the actor location is going to be here, so it's going to be coming from his crotch. So we're going to have it come from his chest. And then we'll take that and plug that right into the start position. Now for the end position, we're actually going to get our follow camera. We're going to pull off of that, get world rotation, pull these back a little bit, and then we're going to get the forward vector. And then off of the forward vector, we're going to multiply this, convert the bottom pin to a float single precision, and we'll use 1500 as our trace distance to start. Probably a little far, but I mean, it'll work. And then we'll just kind of pull off of the add node for the get actor location, add another add node so we can plug these in together like you would normally need to for a trace, so that way it has a location and a rotation, and then set that as our endpoint. Now for the radius, I like something around 20. You don't have to go this big, but I like a larger one just for, a nice room for error. And then the trace channel, we're going to take the drop down and set it to interactable. So now we have a simple trace that's going to happen, but we also need to find a way to execute this trace. Now, this is something that I believe is only in 5.1. I don't think this is in 5.0. It's been a few weeks since I've worked in 5.0. And apparently that's all it takes to forget what's in the default of the graph here. But the camera input here is going to be how we actually detect the object. So if I am correct, and there is no camera execution graph here that you can just kind of pull off on the end here, you're just going to go to the input action section of your project settings, create an input mapping, and use mouse X and mouse Y, and you'll get the same result. You just may not need to put it off of a custom event. You can just put it off of the input event of mouse X, mouse Y. But because we have 5.1 and we have this little thing here at the end already, we can just pull off of the up and down and go detect objects. So we'll call that function. So if I change the draw debug type from none to for duration, compile and save, and hit play, minimize this real quick. Now you'll see that every time I move my camera, it's performing a trace. So we have our trace happening, and it's happening every single time that we move our camera. Perfect. So now what we need to do is create an additional check. Now you don't need to do this per se. I like to do this just because realistically with game design, you can never really have too much security considering that bugs are something we all deal with. So if you can avoid bugs on your interaction system, it is the best. So since we already have a custom trace channel for our interactable objects, we're also going to double check and make sure that the hit actor that we find does implement interface. Now we haven't created our interface yet, but we're just setting things up. And then we'll create another branch with B and left click, hook true into this and the return value into the condition, and we'll just keep it like this for right now. So we'll compile and we'll save. And now what we're going to do is make our interface. So we'll go back to our system assets here, and we'll put it right into the data folder. So we'll right click, we're going to go to blueprints and blueprint interface. And we're going to call this interaction interface. And then we'll double click, open this up, and we're going to make 4 functions in total. The first one is going to be request item info. You can also request weapon info, whatever, but this is just like sending the request to the actor item to get the info. Now, technically, you can run this off of the same interface, but I do recommend running it through 2 different ones because I have found some weird issues that can happen. So this is why I'm recommending doing it this way. Now we're going to add a new input here in the bottom just by clicking the plus symbol. We're going to change this from a Boolean and new params. We'll change the name to requesting actor. This also helps because you can set this based off of, like, if you have a multiplayer game and you have multiple actors or multiple individual player references, you can use this to be able to have it referencing the specific actor that's requesting it versus having it reference all actors or a class reference of some kind. But we'll take the requesting actor, change it to an actor type, and scroll down under object types, set it to actor, make sure it's that blue pin. Then we'll compile and save that. And then we're going to add a new function, and this one is going to be return item info. For this one, we're going to create a new input, and this one's going to be weapon item info, and we're going to switch it to the weapon item info struct, and then we'll go ahead and compile and save that. And then we're going to add another function here. This one's going to be pick up weapon, and we're going to add another input on this one. It's going to be a mesh reference, so we're just going to go mesh ref as the name. And the input variable style, we'll click the drop down and go mesh component. And you'll see mesh component here. And we're just going to click on the object reference. So this way we can use this. And this is just so that way we can kind of force our character's mesh into our actor. Because we're actually going to be attaching everything through the master weapon blueprint, not directly in our character blueprint. We want to make sure we have a way to be able to reference our mesh. And the last function we're going to do, we're going to create one more function. This one's going to be drop weapon. You can also do swap or replace, however you want to do it, but this is just basically going to make it so that way it's going to be the code that detaches the weapon and puts the old weapon or the new weapon where the old weapon was and the old weapon where the new weapon was. So like you're going to attach the new weapon and put the old weapon where you just picked up that new weapon from. So to be able to do this, we only need to create 2 inputs here. First one's going to be drop location. Second one is going to be drop rotation. Almost did location twice. And then for location, we'll make that a vector. And for the rotation, we'll make that a rotator. Now from here, we can just go compile and save. And now we have our interface. So we can go back to our third person character and add that in by going up to the class settings, to the defaults, or sorry, to the details over here on the right side. And then if we go down to interfaces, implemented interfaces, add, we can look for interact, and you'll see interaction interface. So we'll compile, save, go to my blueprint. If we go to interfaces, you'll see all 4 of those functions have now been added. So what we can do is we're going to pull off of the hit actor and type in request item info. And we want to make sure we get the request item info message and then plug that into true. Now for the requesting actor, just pull off and get a reference to self. Now this will be the way you would want to do it for multiplayer as well as single player, because self as an actor reference is actually going to reference the instanced version of the actor versus the overall component or class reference. So this is going to make it so that way it's going to reference like player 1, player 2, player 10, whatever one is requesting it, self is the best way to go about it. Now, we also need to make what we're going to do when we return the item info. So we're going to go to our variables, add a new variable, and we're going to go detected item info, because we're not going to save anything. This is just the info with the item that we're scrolled over, and we're going to go weapon item info. So from here, all we need to do is double click on the under interfaces. We have the return item info here. We can double click on that, and then the detected item info here that we just made, we can get it, or I'm sorry, we want to get the setter node, I'm sorry. So we're going to set detected item info, and we're just going to plug this in just like this. Compile and save. So now we've made a way for our character to save the information. We also need to go into our weapon blueprint and do this kind of the same thing. So we're going to open up our weapon master blueprint, or the main parent blueprint. We're going to go to the event graph, also into the class settings, because we need to add that interface here. So we're going to go under interfaces, implemented interfaces, and look for interact. And interaction interface, bam. So now what we can do is if we go to the interfaces section under the my blueprint, and look for request item info, double click, and then we're going to pull off a requesting actor, and we're going to type in return item info, and you'll see that return item info message. So now we have this going back through, so it creates kind of a circular loop. This one is just to request the info, and this one is to return the info. And this way we don't have any unused values or pins on our interfaces. But we do want to make sure that we're assigning the actor reference, because as I had said in the last video, the actor reference is not going to be assigned by default, and this is going to be where we're actually going to assign it. So we're going to right click on the weapon info, split the struct pin, grab our weapon item info, and we're going to split this struct pin, and we're going to grab the weapon class, weapon name, and then the weapon actor info is going to be reference to self. So even though it's the master blueprint for everything, the self is going to reference the individual thing that's actually this is being called through. So this is going to give us not only the individual item or the child, but also the individual instance of that child as well. So we can compile and save. And now if I go back to BP third person character off of the event return item info, drag off, do a print string here. I can split this struct pin, get the weapon name, pull this up, compile, save. And now what I can do is I'll go ahead and I'll drag my AK into the world. I'll drag the 9mm into the world. And I'll also drag another version of the AK into the world. Now, this won't necessarily show up, but I'm going to do a play twice so that way you guys can see what we're doing. So now if I go up, okay, almost forgot. We got to set the collision. So we didn't set up the trace channel, so it wouldn't have been able to detect anything. I apologize, that's my fault. So we're going to go back to the weapon master blueprint really quickly so we can fix the collision for our trace channel. So if you click on the skeletal mesh component here, go up to the details, type in collision. Now you'll see collision presets, no collision. Change this to custom, collision enabled to collision enabled query and physics. Make sure to block the interactable channel, but also disable destructible, vehicle, physics body, and pawn. Make sure that these are on ignore, and we're only blocking world static and world dynamic. The reason why is because you can use a physics simulation when you drop the items. We are not going to be doing that in this video because physics do take a little bit of extra work, but to just swap the weapon, we don't really need to do this. We can just turn collision off completely, but I just wanted to show you guys that you can keep world static and world dynamic, and it doesn't really affect much of anything. Except for colliding with the world, which, that just means that you have some easy way to define IK movements and things like that. But if we compile and save, minimize, and then we hit play. Let's see if it works. All right, so we're getting detection now, but it's not printing out. Let's see what's going on. Okay. So the interface, we forgot to set it. So for our line trace here, on the does implement interface, just make sure to do interaction interface, because right now it's looking to see if we actually have, or if the item has an interface, but we haven't told it what interface it is that we actually want it to have. So now you can see AK-47 is being printed. If I go up to the pistol, we got 9mm pistol being printed. So this is the name. This is what's displayed on the screen. Now, if I go and undo weapon name, put in the actor reference, and have it get display name instead, and then I'll click on play. So we'll look at this pistol is going to be listed as 9mm pistol BP. This one, AK BP. But if I go over to this one, AK BP2. So it's getting the individual instance of the individual child, even though it's all running through the master blueprint or the main parent blueprint. So now we have the ability to have our weapons be detected and be able to get the information about the specific actor. And the reason why this is important is because now we can save the individual actor reference and use this as we continue on. But for right now, we're going to undo the get display name, hook in the weapon name, and we'll use this for right now until we create our UI for when we hover over the weapon. Alright, so now it's time to start saving the information and attaching the weapons to our character. So, first thing we should probably do is add in the sockets to our character, so that way we actually have the things to be able to assign the location to. So for me, I'm going to go to the Tribal Warrior folder here, and I think it's all going to be in Demo, Meshes, nope. Here, we can do this a different way. We'll go to Third Person, Blueprints, BP Third Person Character, and I'll just find it this way. Sometimes finding meshes is not always the easiest thing when you have folders of textures and 5 different mesh styles and a whole bunch of stuff, but thankfully we've got this little skeleton option here we can click to be able to get to the skeleton for our specific character. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with just the idle position. So the sword on this is going to be on one hip, side of the hip, the pistol is going to be on the other, and then the rifle is going to be on his back. So for me, I'm going to do a thigh L, or thigh R, I'm sorry. We're going to right click, add socket, and this one is going to be the pistol hip socket. Now you don't have to add it to the thigh, I just like doing it because I'm going to put my pistol right around, like a little lower, because his torso is a little higher up, so I wouldn't want to put it right here. I'd probably want to put it a little lower. So I'm going to put it right about there, and then we're going to right click, add preview asset, and we'll start off with just the V100, so like the 9mm. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing like multiple weapons, your rotation values are almost never going to be the same. So you're going to find a lot of times that one rotation value, so like when I'm done setting up this, it's probably not going to align as well as I would probably want it to with another pistol. So something to keep in mind is that you are going to need to do some rotation changes depending on the weapon that you're using. But we are going to go over how to do that, so don't worry. But now that we got our pistol hip socket there, now what we want to do is look for the spine. And we're going to go for spine 1, because I want the sword to be a little higher up than the pistol. So we're going to go right click, add socket, sword, hip socket. And while we're here, we'll also go to spine 3, or maybe spine, yeah, we'll do a spine 4. We'll right click, because I want it, this is where the rifle is going to attach to the back, so I want it to be somewhat more in the middle. So we'll add socket, rifle, back, socket. And then we'll just search for sockets. Alright, so from here we can just again add the preview assets like we did before. So we're going to go right click, add preview asset, and we'll add our sword. We'll rotate you so that way it's facing the right direction. And then just move it up into position so that way it can be grabbed when we decide. Now this is really all, sockets are. It's just basically playing around with location and rotation until it seems good enough for what you want. Then we'll do the same thing with the back. We'll add our rifle. And again, just using one of the meshes to be able to align it. And then from there, we'll just, change the certain rotations inside of the blueprint after. So I'll go ahead and I'll rotate this because I want the butt of the gun to be more facing up, just because I know that's the way my animation works. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that you want to try to line up your sockets based off of how your animations are going to work. So for me, I've got pistol being drawn by the right hand here, sword being drawn by the right hand on this side, and then rifle being drawn by the right hand on the back side here. But now that we've got all of our locations set up here, we can just go and save this. And we're going to go back to the BP third person character. And this is where we're going to start creating some basic inputs. So if we go to our third person character, oops, that's Tribal Warrior, go to the inputs, actions, and we're going to create a new input. So we're going to right click and create a new input action. Now if you're on 5.0, just follow along using the project settings and create the same input action. But we're going to go input action, interact. And it should by default be made as a Boolean value for those of you using 5.1, so that's exactly what we want. Now we're going to open up the IMC defaults, open up the mappings, and we'll add that interact to our new mappings. Now for me, I'm going to make this the E key, and we'll just leave it like that, and boom. Now from here, we can go ahead and just right click in our character's blueprint and get interact from the input action event. Now, for those of you, again, using 5.0, you're just going to run all of what I'm telling you off of pressed. For those of you using 5.1, we're going to be using started because we just wanted to fire off once, and started does exactly that. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we are actually looking at a valid item. So we're going to take the detected item info, split the struct pin, take the actor reference, and type in is valid. And we're going to get this, actually no, we want the other one. So we want to get the is valid, the one with the question mark here, because this is going to give an execution pin. So we're going to pull off of started. If it is valid, perfect. Now, we also need to make a way for us to be able to save information about the weapons that we have, because this system is going to be designed to have one pistol, one rifle, one sword, and if you change this weapon, it's going to change the weapon that you have on the character. So we want to be able to define what weapons we already have. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable, and we're going to call this current weapons. And then we're going to change it from the weapon item info struct to a string, and then we're going to go to the details panel and change the container type from single to map, and then we're going to change it from an integer to the weapon item info struct. And the reason why we're doing this is because if we compile, we now have the ability to create a list. So we can go just by clicking on the variable here, current weapons, I can click the plus symbol and I get this, and I can go rifle, add again, pistol, add again, sword. So this way, there's always going to be a reference inside of there, but it's also going to have the weapon class, weapon name, and an actor reference. So what we're going to do is we're going to take current weapons, get them, and we're also going to drag off of the item info weapon class and type in switch, and we're going to switch on the weapon class. Now from here, for rifle, we're going to pull off of current weapons, we're going to type in find, and then on the bottom here, we'll have a string reference where we can find a specific value in our map. So for rifle, we want to find rifle. And then we can go ahead and split the output struct value, get an actor reference, type in valid. And this time, we're going to get the function. So we want the one that returns with a Boolean value. So basically what this is going to do is that if we do have a valid weapon, so if, for example, if we have a rifle and it's looking for the actor reference and it's a valid object, then we already have a rifle on us. However, if there is no valid object, then there is no weapon that we currently have. So for this, we're going to go branch, plug this in like this, and then we're going to duplicate this 3 times. Well, I guess really duplicate it twice so we have 3 of them. Because we're going to go rifle, then pistol, and then sword. So this way we have something looking for all 3 of the default values that we just made. And then again with a branch, so we'll just go B left click, hook the return value into these, and then pistol into pistol, and sword into the sword check. Now the reason why we're doing this is because again, we want to be able to tell if we have a currently active weapon. So if we don't have a currently active weapon, which is going to be on false, then this is where we're just going to go and attach whatever weapon we have. And now from here, what we can do is we can take the detected item variable here, and we'll pull off the detected actor reference, and we'll just go pick up weapon message. Now, we're not going to plug this in yet, but we are going to be having them all run through here, but we want to do one additional thing. We're going to take the current weapons, and we now need to make sure that we add the weapon to this list. So we're going to pull off of current weapons, type in add, and make sure we get under map, not operators. And then we're just going to type in whatever the associated one is going to be. So for this one, it's going to be rifle, and this one's going to be pistol, and then this one's going to be sword. So this way we now have the ability to add for each individual weapon type. So if it's false, we'll add. And again, this is just because we don't have a weapon currently equipped in here, so we can just go right through and add that in. Now, we want to make sure to also use the weapon information. So we're going to take the detected weapon info, duplicate it, recombine the struct pin, and then we can just plug this right into here like this. We don't even need to worry about like specifically setting things up. We just need to add the weapon info that we're detecting to the specific map that we're setting up. So now we're checking to see if we do have a weapon. If we don't, we're going to go ahead and add that weapon info in, and then we're also going to go ahead and pick up the weapon. So we'll plug all these into here. Now, from here, we also need this mesh reference. So we're going to go to the components tab, get our character mesh here, drag it off in, and plug it into that mesh reference, because this way we now have the ability to find the sockets that we just made earlier. So now we'll go ahead and we'll compile and save, and now we're going to go to the weapon master. We're going to go to the blueprint tab under interfaces, and we're going to look for that pickup weapon event. Now we see, again, we have this mesh reference. So we also need to get the weapon item info here, and we're going to take it and split the struct pin because we want to get the weapon class specifically. So we're going to pull off of the weapon class. We're going to type in switch. So we're going to switch on the weapon class enum. And then for each one of these, we're just going to pull off and we're going to attach actor to component. And then we'll duplicate it twice because we're going to need 2 of these. Actually, we'll set this one up first and then duplicate it. So the location rule, we're going to set to snap to target. And then now we'll just duplicate it. So now we have 3 of them, 1 for each style of weapon. So we'll plug pistol into this one and sword into this one. And then the mesh reference is going to go into the parent of each one of these. Now for rifle, we're going to go rifle back socket. And this is the reason why I like to keep my name simple. The weapon type, the location, and then just socket. So like for the pistol, it's pistol hip socket. And sword is sword hip socket. So now we've attached the actor to our character utilizing this mesh reference. We also need to do one other thing. Now, I can show you really quickly, actually, before we do this, why we would need to do this. So if I go and I hit play, now we'll be able to go in and see that the AK-47 is being detected. If I press E, it attaches to my back. Now, currently, you can see the weapon is being detected by our trace. Now we could push it forward, but if we look behind us, it's still going to be affecting the trace. So this is the reason why we want to make sure that all of our weapons are made off of this single skeletal mesh component, because we can drag this into the weapon master event graph here, pull off of it, and then type in collision. And we're going to look for this one, set collision response to channel, not to all channels, just to channel, because this allows you to be able to specify the channel that you want to modify. So for us, that's interactable, and set the default response to ignore. And we're just going to duplicate this onto all of these. Now you could just run them all into one if you wanted to, but I'm just duplicating it so that way I don't have too many things running into the same thing. But if we compile and save, and then we go ahead and play now, and I go over to the rifle, pick it up, you can see that now my trace is no longer being affected. I can go up to the pistol here, and there we go. Pistol has been attached to my hip. So something to keep in mind is that, we got these nice attachments, but you want to make sure that your line traces are also not being affected. Now, what I want to show you too, if we go ahead and we click on play, just because I want to show you guys why the map is so awesome. So if I go and I pick up this, and I pick up the 9mm pistol, and then I go to my blueprint here. Now, change no debug object selected to the third person character spawned. I then hover over the current weapons. You can see that we now have the ability to see things, and if we hover over this and look at rifle, we have the weapon class, the weapon name, the actor reference with all the different information, and we have the same thing for pistol, but if we go to sword, none, it has absolutely no information. So this is the reason why I like setting up these maps, because we don't need to use Boolean values, we can just use checks to see if there's any actor actually currently in its place. So the last thing that we're going to do in this video is we're going to just set it up so that we can swap the weapons into a different weapon. So we can change the weapon that's on our back, on our hip, or whatever. We can change all of the different information or the different weapon based off of what we're interacting with. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our BP third person character. We're going to right click and create a new custom event. And we're going to call this swap weapon. And then we're going to go up here for under our interact section, call our swap weapon function, and we're going to plug true into all of these. And we can actually even change this to swap weapon drop, because we're going to have 2 different versions of this. So we'll go swap weapon drop, and then we're going to get the detected item info, pull off of the weapon class, do a switch on weapon class, and then we're also going to go ahead and get our current weapons. And we're going to pull off of it and find, and we're going to do just like what we did before. We're going to find each one. We're going to find the rifle, we're going to find the pistol, and we're going to find the sword. So we'll take these 2, push them out of the way, take the rifle, right click, and split the struct bin. Now for the actor reference, we're going to go ahead and call our drop weapon message. Plug this in to rifle. Now we also need to reset our information here. So we're going to take the current weapons add here that we just made, duplicate it, plug it into rifle, and then plug that into there. The reason why is because this way we are basically unsetting all of the information for the rifle, so there's no current weapon or actor information for it to find for the validation check that we have it running through. This will all make sense here in a moment. But we'll take these two and we'll just hook them up here. So we'll go pistol into pistol, sword into sword, and then we're going to hook these all up into drop weapon. The target's going to be whatever the actor reference is for the weapon that we're selecting. And we'll just take this and push this into here. All right. Had a bit of a access crash. Gotta love those. So things might look a little bit moved around, but nothing's been changed. So we're going to go now and on the drop weapon code here for the rifle, we're going to take this and this whole sequence here, and we're going to duplicate it again 3 times because we want it to be individual for each weapon. So we can go ahead and take this and we'll move these back. It's always good to give yourself some more space. So we'll take that and put that into there, take that, put that into there, take this whole thing, duplicate it, and there we go. So now the target is going to be the pistol and then sword. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's going to take the individual actor reference for, like, if you pick up, let's say there's 5 swords in your game of the same style, and there's 5 different instance versions, I should say. Sword 04 is what you've picked up out of the 5 options. Well, sword 04 is now going to be that actor object reference, so it's not going to try to drop the weapon of a weapon that you don't actually have attached to you by referencing like a class object reference of some kind. And then from here, we only need to now just define the location and rotation. And it's realistically just done by getting the detected item info, split the struct bin, go off of the actor reference and get actor transform. We're going to split the struct bin here, and we're going to go location, rotation, and we're going to plug it into all of them because this is going to be that, the weapon that we're scrolling over. So we want to save this rotation and location because now if we go into our weapon master blueprint here, double click on the drop weapon, and then we're going to go ahead and just grab the detach from, so we're going to go detach from actor, target equals self, location rule we're going to keep relative, but then we're going to pull off of here and set actor location. So we're going to set actor location and rotation. And we'll just pull this down like this so we can plug in the location, rotation. So now we've got our location and rotation being applied, our weapon being dropped. Now we also want to make sure we fix our collision because when we pick up our weapons, we're ignoring the interactable channel now. So we want to make sure that we set this back to block, just like this. So now we're detaching it from our actor, setting a new location, and then setting the collision back. So now what we've done, just to kind of recap really quick, is that we've now creating a swap weapon drop custom event, and it's going in and checking to see which one that we have, or which weapon it is, or which weapon style that we're detecting of a class, going into each one, resetting all of the actual information, finding the actor reference of the actor that or the weapon that we're currently trying to swap with, dropping that weapon, and replacing its location with the new weapon that you're picking up. So I hope that all makes sense. But we'll compile, save, we'll minimize here, and I'm going to go into the weapons folder that we have set up, and I'm going to put the rifle 2 and the future pistol. And then we'll go ahead and also add in our sword, both of them. And then I'll go ahead and I'll click on play. So now, if I go ahead and I go up to the sword here, now, this is something I actually kept by default. So we're going to show you how to do this. You can see how it's not detecting anything. And that's because some assets actually don't come with physics. So we're going to set the physics up on the swords. And that's why I saved these for last. But if we go to the pistol, for example, we'll start with the 9mm, which we actually have set up for. So you can see we've got our 9mm pistol is now on our hip. Go to the rifle. Rifle is now on our back. However, if I go to the future pistol here, you can see that didn't work. Now, why didn't that work? Well, the reason why, if we go to our BP third person character here, we're looking for all of our information. We're getting it, checking to see if there's something valid, going back through, and then awesome. All right. But once we drop our weapon, we don't have anything bringing it back through to be able to replace the actual weapon information. How do we fix that? Well, we can go from the drop weapon here and create a new custom event first, actually. So we're going to go custom event, swap weapon. And And then what we'll do is we'll plug this into the switch enumerator. The reason why you don't want to plug it, I mean, you could plug it into the validator, but I've always found that that causes more problems than it solves, and it's not really necessary. So that's why I'm not doing that. But from drop weapon, we can go swap weapon, call the function, and we're going to plug all of these in like that. So if I compile and save now, and I go up and I grab the 9mm pistol, and then I go up to the future pistol. All right, so it looks like the reason why this isn't working, I just took a quick look. I actually did this in the wrong order. So we're going to take all these adds off here because this is resetting the information and then it's trying to use the information. And we all know that that's not the way you're supposed to do it. So that was me making it stupid and I apologize. But we're just going to go ahead and take on the swap weapon drop code here. We're going to take the adds that are resetting all the information inside of our map. We're going to take those off in the beginning and then we're going to plug the drop weapon right into here like so. So I apologize about that, guys. Because then we're just going to take the add and reset it at the end rather than in the beginning. Because y'all, we need our information to be available if it's going to be used for anything. But if I go and plug this in now, see with the find going in first and then just resetting the information. And we also have our swap weapon recall going back through our code here. So if I compile and save now, we'll go up and we'll pick up our 9mm pistol. And then if we go up to our future pistol here, just like that, you can see that the future pistol the rotation isn't correct, but we have the pistols being swapped with locations. And because of the fact that we also made sure to fix the trace channels, we can also swap back to the 9mm pistol if we wanted to. So we now have the ability to be able to swap back and forth between them. There's one last thing that I want to just cover really quickly before we close out this part of the video. So, as I had said before, these two weapons here, the two swords, they do not come with physics assets. So, I'm going to show you guys how to be able to make your own. So, we're going to open up the blueprint here. We're going to go to the blueprint. We're going to look for the skeletal mesh here. And we'll start with the hero sword. We'll just do this one first. So, if I scroll over it, you're going to see physics asset is none. So, I'm going to right click on the skeletal mesh, create, physics asset, create, and assign. Now, take the minimum bone size, set it to something like 2, you want like a low value. The primitive type, though, change it to multi-convex hull. And then if we do create asset, it might take a moment depending on the complexity of your model, but now we have a physics asset, and it's defined by the blade, defined by the edge here, so we have a really nice looking physics asset. And we're going to do the same thing on the other sword as well. That's how easy it is to create a physics asset. You can create them manually as well if you wanted to, but personally, I wouldn't really say that it's worth it. The convex hull, if you're using simple meshes, actually works really well, so we don't need to go too crazy. We just need to make sure that it has some sense of collision so we can use that rather than having to use something like a capsule collision that doesn't really cover the entire thing or covers too much. So we're going to go create on the Black Knight blade, physics asset, create and assign, set the minimum bone size to 2, the primitive type to the multi-convex hull, and create asset. And then again, it missed the tip a little bit, but that's all right. I mean, it did a pretty good job. So we can go ahead and just close this out. And now, there we go. If I go and you can see Black Knight's sword is popping up and I can press E and then it gets attached to my hip. I can do the same thing for the ancient sword. And it attaches to my hip. I can go and get my future pistol and my AK-47. I guess it's really more of an M4. I don't know why I called it that. But the last thing I want to cover really quickly, though, is the pistol rotation here. You can see how that is off. Easy way to correct this. If we go to our content, go back into our weapons here, what we're going to do is we're going to go and bring our future pistol in and our 9mm pistol. And we're going to take a look at what the difference in rotation. Realistically, we need to take this and we need to rotate it so that way it's more of a 90-degree angle to the right. So we're going to kind of look behind it, just like this, go into the blueprint here, and we'll just rotate it 90 degrees that direction. Now, if I minimize, you can see that now the blueprints themselves are facing the same way. So I can pick up the future pistol and now it's on my hip properly. So you don't necessarily need to worry about the origin point if you're using blueprints, because a lot of times the actor's location is where the origin is going to be assigned by, not necessarily the mesh's origin. So something just to make it easier for you guys, because I know a lot of times weapons do not have the same rotation, so you got to kind of mess around with that. But now we have the ability to pick up our weapons, to swap our weapons, attach them to our characters, save all of our weapon information so we know what weapons we have, and we have all of that being stored inside of our character's blueprint. So now from here, it's going to be going into drawing the weapons and using them. So we're going to be going into the animation blueprint part in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I know this one went a little bit longer, but the character information is a lot to go in, so I wanted to make sure to cover it as best as I could. Also, there was a few little hiccups along the way. But hopefully I'll see you guys in the next part. That's going to close it out for today, and as always, stay animated.